Welcome. I'm Ellen Kekalkevich, Executive Director for United Partners for Human Services. I am pleased to welcome you to the second webinar in the UPHS 2015 webinar series. A final webinar has been scheduled on the topic of Giving Tuesday, Plans at Work at 9:30 a.m. on September 29th. Registration information is available on the UPHS website, uphsfl.org. Each webinar, including today's, will be posted to the UPHS website after the live event. The first webinar in the 2015 series, LinkedIn for Nonprofit Professionals, has already been archived to the website. The webinars from the 2014 series can also be found there. If you are participating today in the live webinar, you will be able to engage in the Q&A portion, which will be held at the end of the presentation. You are encouraged throughout the webinar to post your questions that will be then answered at the end. Today's webinar is 6 Strategies for Active Supervision. I am pleased to introduce our instructor, Carol Edwards, Training and Professional Development Coordinator, Big Bend Community-Based Care. Welcome, Carol.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to offer a follow-up supervision workshop from our last year's session. And so first of all, I'd like to go ahead and begin with the session objectives. So for this session, we'll have 6 objectives. Our first objective is to communicate effectively. Our second objective is to schedule regular meeting times with employees. Third objective is to give credit where credit is due. Fourth, we'll be looking at how to focus on employee strengths. Fifth, to help address employee needs. And the 6th strategy is to be a problem solver. So let's get started with the first point, all about communication. So in talking about communication, there's some pointers that are effective for supervisors to use in working with your staff. The first pointer is that effective communication is, of course, foundational in any positive relationships, and that's at work or in your personal life. So when you think about it, when you have a positive interaction with someone, it really motivates you to continue the dialogue with them, to continue talking with them, and to continue that relationship. Also, when you think about successful communication, it's important to break it down into 4 key components. First of all, your message. Thinking about your message before the words actually come out is a good idea. So you want to think about it so that you have time to really gather your thoughts and ensure that the words that you say are going to be ones that you feel really good about. You also want to plan the right time to share a message, especially if the message involves correction or critique. It's important to identify what might be the most appropriate time. So there are moments when you consider hot moments when folks may be especially busy. There may be a lot of demands on your employees at that time. You're pressed to meet a target or a deadline. That may not be the most opportune time to deliver a message of critique. So you may want to wait until you have a more cool moment to be able to share that kind of information. So you just want to keep in mind how important timing can be. The third component of that message, we want to talk about the delivery of it, how you deliver the message. So you want to think about the tone in which it's delivered and also the manner in which you deliver the message. Sometimes it's important to save messages for an in-person communication opportunity. Other times it's okay to communicate certain things over the telephone or through email or through a text message. So you want to make sure that the message matches the delivery method. So let's talk about that just for a minute, because so many of us are busy and we're using lots of quick communication. So let's take a moment to talk about email and text communication. Because email and text do not give you the opportunity to see the person's facial expression, sometimes a tone of voice may convey negativity when you don't intend for that to be communicated at all. So you want to take a little bit more time. One of the things that I try and do if I'm composing an email is to take a moment, make sure you read through the email, and then if it's an email that may be a little touchy, you may want to have another supervisor review that email for you prior to you sending it. So you want to make sure that you get feedback on that, and make sure that you don't just hit the send button too quickly. And the same thing with text messages. You want to save anything that's corrective for a more appropriate method of communication. The fourth component is your audience. So you want to think about who it is that you're communicating with, and also who is surrounding that person. So for example, if you're in a team environment and there's a message that you have for one particular individual, you may want to think twice about sharing that message in front of the entire group. So when we talk about our audience, you want to make sure that you can direct group messages to a group, but individual messages in an individual communication. I know that I've been in group environments before and worked on teams where a supervisor needs to deliver a communication that is corrective and it's addressed to the entire group in a general way. I found that to be pretty ineffective because, first of all, the person that you intend it for may not understand that the message is really for them. And also, staff that are performing well in a certain area then are the subject of the same communication, and they may not have deserved that kind of communication. So you want to be careful to make sure that your audience is always appropriate. A third communication pointer: good communication is interactive. So this is always one that can be a little bit tough to practice. It's about speaking, but also about listening. And so, you always want to keep in mind that it's hard to listen well when you're thinking about your next point. So you want to make sure that if you're trying to understand someone that you're supervising, they can pick up on your understanding based on how you respond to what they've said. So if the words may not exactly match what they're feeling, and you're not paying attention to nonverbals as well as verbal communication, you could miss a very critical communication from one of your employees. So you want to make sure that you are listening well, that you're tuned in, and remember that you don't have to have an immediate response to whatever they're saying. So you can take a moment after that communication and gather your thoughts instead of thinking about that while the person is speaking to you. So you want to keep that in mind. Improving communication skills will, of course, make you a better leader. During our last webinar, we talked about great leadership and some of the components that go into great leadership. And communication skills is one of those things that becomes so important. Being able to tune in, it really does communicate to your staff that they're important and that you value them. So let's look at that on our next slide. This is a quote, and it really is a piece of information I think we can just break down a little bit, but it's all about listening. And there are two primary messages I'd like for you to get from this quote. So it says that listening well enables supervisors to communicate with employees who are experiencing workplace problems. It talks about how supervisors listen and how that then connects with them feeling valued and appreciated. So the two things I want to pull out of this is that Listening assures employees that they're valued contributors, and it helps to instill in your staff a greater sense of confidence in their own power, their own message. So think about this. If an employee feels like they're a valued contributor, they are more likely to contribute on a regular basis on any work assignments, work projects, anything that can help make your organization a stronger organization. So when they feel like we're listening as supervisors, it gives them permission and encouragement to continue to share their thoughts, their perspective, and their contributions. Also, with building greater confidence, when we're listening to employees, it says that what you have to say is important, and I'd like for you to continue sharing, which then gives an employee that message that their ideas have great value. So those are two important points to keep in mind. Now, I'd like to take a moment and go through 8 steps of effective communication. These steps to communication can be found in a lot of literature about communication. There are many publications for agencies and organizations to improve organizational communication. And so if you look through some of those resources, you would find similar steps. So these 8 steps they're a compilation of some of the tools for effective communications that you might find in multiple reviews and research. So the first one, focus on positive actions and interactions. Don't you feel great about your agency, your supervisor, your organization when the focus is on the things that you do well? So for most people, they want to do a great job. They're committed to their organization and supervisor. So when you think about this one, it's important to keep in mind that if you're authentic and honest in communication, you'll be setting up a solid basis for trust. And that's very important. So when your employees believe that what you're saying is information they can count on, that builds that trust in that relationship, and it solidifies it so that you can then count on that employee. So that's important to keep in mind. Redirecting an employee when they make a mistake is something that I think would be appreciated by most employees. All of us make mistakes. No one is perfect. And so if we're able to give an employee the opportunity to correct a situation or to provide another task that allows them to succeed, that is a way that we can then reinforce with that employee their own sense of value and the fact that we understand that growth is a process that we're all learning. If you want to keep in mind on this particular point, think about the stage that your employees are. If they're new employees or if they've been there for a while, and so if you identify the things that they still have to grow and learn that are reasonable expectations, then that should not be something that results in a criticism. So if they haven't had the opportunity to develop a skill set, then to go back in and be corrective about it is really not fair to the employee. So you want to make sure that you're focused on positive actions and behaviors, and then of course we're able to redirect when that employee makes a mistake. Give them an opportunity to change and improve that. And also it communicates that change and growth is achievable and that you believe that they can do it. Step 3, observe the employee's behavior, and as soon as you see progress being made, provide specific and meaningful praise. So this one is important. We talk about this even when we talk about behavior change with children. We talk about positive reinforcement, and we talk about having consequences follow immediately after a behavior. The same is true for us as adults. So as soon as you see progress happening, Even if it is a small step, that is an ultimate way to encourage your employees to continue growing if you would identify that to them and give them some meaningful praise as soon as you see that step being taken. So you might have an example of that employee that is habitually late on turning in their timesheet or a report or something like that. And after redirecting them and expressing how important it is for that to be completed in a timely manner, when that employee then does it, it's important to then recognize it, to let them know that it was appreciated um, right away, because then that reinforces that behavior. Step 4, begin each meeting or morning with a cheerleading tour by highlighting everything employees are doing correctly. Now, I was a cheerleader for a long time, so I always use cheerleading or sports analogies. But basically, what we're talking about is starting off the day by focusing on what's going well, what people are doing right. What are the successes? What are the accomplishments that we're achieving? Of course, we know that there's work to do, there's improvements that need to be made, and we all have challenges that we're going to encounter during our day. But at the beginning of every day, at the beginning of that morning, it's important to start out focusing on something that people are doing well. It starts the day off on a positive note. People feel as though you noticed, especially if it's something from the day before. So if you have staff that have been there the day before, they put in 100% of their effort, they made some achievements, and you come in the next morning and you're able to identify and say, wow, yesterday that was really impressive. What a great job we all accomplished and taking care of that, or meeting that task, or revising that policy. We made some progress. Now let's look at what we have in front of us today. So being able to do that on a regular basis, it will give your employees a sense of accomplishment, and it also helps you to see that we are progressive, that things are changing. Step 5, follow up by asking if there are any problems the individual or staff is facing with which you can assist. So this is all about asking if there are situations in which you can assist in making improvements. So one of the things that does is that helps you as a supervisor to share in the work, to share in the problems, to share in the challenges. So if our employees feel like we're in there with them, sometimes, you roll up your sleeves and you get in there and you show that we really are a team. So we work together to make those successes happen. That can really create a sense of unity among your team. And it also models for other team members how important it is to help each other, regardless of our position or hierarchy in an organization. So we've all heard the quote that teamwork makes the dream work. And so by working with your employees on issues that they're facing, they'll see that really come to life. Step 6, provide positive, specific feedback. So if you don't have immediate solutions, you can be honest about that and let your employees know that you'll look into things and come back later with a solution. So this follows step 5 if employees are giving you input about something that you can't really solve right at that moment. You may not have the information, you may not have the authority that's required to give a response. But instead of kind of pushing it to the side, you want to communicate really clearly to your staff that you will follow up, you will look for solutions, and you will come back with information. Step 7, say something positive when everything is going well. So that leads back up to our step 1, remember. So we started with the positive and we're ending with the positive. So everything else comes in between. So when things are going well, focus on those positive things. And then you conclude with step 8, which is coaching people to recognize themselves performing well. Because what this does is, because you focused on something positive, you've mentored and modeled for others how important it is to recognize great performance and accomplishment. And so now that transfers over into your employee so that they can see when they're doing things well, they can see their accomplishments, and they then feel good about their work, and it results in a greater sense of work esteem for each employee. So those are the 8 steps of effective communication. And like I said at the beginning, you'll find those in lots of literature around professional communications. And so hopefully you'll find those steps to be helpful as you move forward in improving your supervision with your employees. So let's talk about meeting with the employees. So some people just aren't meeting people, and others really need meetings to feel connected on a team. So there was a survey that was done by Ken Blanchard Companies, and you may be familiar with him. He's written a lot on effectiveness of employees and organizations. And so they did a survey, pretty large survey, in fact, all about meetings and how much, how often, and who preferred meetings. Well, there are some interesting statistics that came out of that. The first one is that 89% of people want to meet with their manager on at least a monthly basis, with 44% of people polled wanting to meet at least once per week. So that is the overwhelming majority that would like at least a monthly meeting. But half of everyone polled, pretty much half, really desire to have a meeting at least once per week. Now, that may seem too frequent to some of you, but that's the results of the survey of employees. So this was from that perspective, not from the supervisor's perspective, but from the employee's perspective. One-on-one meetings are an important way that leaders demonstrate that they care about employees. So even though when we talk about meetings in general, we're talking about team meetings or group meetings, I also want to emphasize that those meetings may not occur in person. You may not be sitting in front of your team. You may be working in different offices or different locations. And so you can still have effective meetings if it's over a conference call or using Skype, using a telephone. So there are ways to have those meetings happen regularly. The important thing is to remember that because you may not be in the same location does not mean that people, your staff does not desire to have a regular meeting. So if you have a one-on-one meeting, that's a way that it communicates to that employee that, hey, I must matter, I'm important, you've taken the time out to meet with me, not just as a member of your team, but as an individual. That also allows the employee an opportunity to ask questions that they may not feel comfortable asking in a group setting. So having that one-on-one can be really important with finding out, particularly if an employee has demonstrated that they may be having some challenges in a particular area. So you want to make sure that you have time for one-on-one meetings. Spending time, of course, is a clear indicator to the employee that their work is important and that they're a valued member of the team, and of course, making yourself available. One of the things I wanted to mention about the survey that was done by Ken Blanchard Companies was around gender, and this I thought was really interesting. So think about who you believe might desire to meet most often, males or females. Well, I was surprised that it was males. So in the surveys they did, overwhelmingly, men were much more likely to state that they wanted to have regular meetings with their supervisors than females were. One of the things we can tie that to is the need for immediate feedback and to know that your work is going in the right direction. So that was kind of interesting to keep in mind. So if you're supervising a group of men, just keep in mind that they do desire to have regular meetings and communications. one more statistic on this particular slide about meetings is that there are particular issues that employees would like to meet about. One issue is goal setting. Second, goal review, performance feedback, problem solving, soliciting support, and problems with colleagues. So about 63% of those respondents said that they wanted to discuss those issues often or on a regular basis, but only about half of them have an opportunity to do that based on the way that their meetings are organized. So you might want to keep that in mind and think about when was the last time you, in a meeting, provided an opportunity for staff to participate in setting goals or reviewing goals. One of the things that we find is that goals are set sometimes during an annual review, but that goal may not be revisited until the next review. But in order to make sure that an employee has an opportunity to be successful on that goal, it's important to have a regular review of those goals to make sure they have the supports and the resources to make sure that that goal can become a reality. Also, when you think about performance feedback, there is nothing more affirming than knowing that the work you're doing is making a difference and it's resulting in improved performance. So that's something that you want on a regular basis. The other one I wanted to mention briefly was the last one, and that was problems with colleagues. So that's one that we may push to the side because we think it's a personal issue and not something that we want to spend meeting time with. But if part of our leadership involves building a strong team, it's important for us to know where team members are with each other and not just with us. So providing some time to address any challenges they have with colleagues gives you, the supervisor, an opportunity to then give some direction and guidance to them about how they might handle those situations that might keep them from getting larger than they need to be. So keep those things in mind, those 6 or 7 issues, as you schedule your meetings with employees. And remember that employees want more meetings with their boss. So we've got to make time to make it happen. Okay, one of our other 6 strategies that we talked about in our beginning for our objectives was employee recognition. Now, this is the fun one to me. So it brings a smile to your face as a supervisor, as a manager, when you're recognizing employees, because it feels good, because it means you're focused on something positive. It also provides that positive tone into your office for your employees. So let's talk about employee recognition. First thing about it, it has to be a priority. If it's not a priority, you're likely to get caught up in the day-to-day activity and let long periods go by before we've said 2 very important words, and that is thank you. So one attitude is that employees should be happy to just work there, and they should be happy they have a job and happy they have benefits and all those things. So I want to turn that around and say we should be happy that we have the opportunity to have people work for us and for our organizations that care enough about the work we do to do their job with excellence. So that's a reframe on the way that we might ordinarily look at it. But without great employees, there's no way to be a great supervisor. And without that, there's no way to have a great organization. So it's critical that we take the time to recognize the contributions of our employees, and that has to be more than their paycheck, their benefits, and other things that we might do as part of their employee package. This is something completely different. People who feel appreciated are more positive about themselves and their ability to contribute. And potentially, the more positive a person is, they tend to be your best employees. So keep in mind that it's not just for the few, but employee recognition is about recognizing everyone because everyone matters. I put together some specific guidelines for employee recognition because I know this is one that some of us, we struggle with trying to come up with ideas about how to make this happen. So on this slide, there's a picture of a book that I thought was a pretty cool one. It's called The Power of Thanks: How Social Recognition Empowers Employees and Creates a Best Place to Work. So this is just one book. There are other great ones out there, but this one in particular was one that I liked, and it caught my eye because it was transformative. It's all about transforming the culture of an organization. But I like it because it's simple: the power of thanks. So let's go through some guidelines. I've got 2 or 3 slides about guidelines for employee recognition. And so the first one: decide what you want to achieve through your employee recognition efforts. So this is important to say, what is it that we want to get out of this? So what's our driving goal? Are we trying to increase staff morale? Are we trying to acknowledge high performance in certain areas? You're really just trying to be clear about what is it you want to achieve. Because if you do that, it's going to have more meaning. One of the things about recognition is that it just shouldn't be something that's like, okay, we'll just, do a little thank you day and that's it. If it doesn't have meaning, it will not transcend into a culture change in your organization. You have to create goals and action plans for employee recognition. So you want to make sure that you keep a couple things in mind. Fairness, and that means that the playing field is fair for everyone to be able to be recognized. Clarity, that it's clear what the expectations are. And consistency, that if you have set up something, for example, like an employee of the month, that criteria for how you get there, it has to be fair. You have to make it clear, and you've got to do it the same way all the time. So sometimes they're corporate favorites in your organization, and it may be easy to reward when they may not have earned that particular recognition. So if this is a recognition that people have to earn, then make sure that you apply the same standard across the board so that employees feel as if it's attainable for everyone to achieve. It should be so clear that if they apply the exact same effort, they would get the same recognition or reward the next time. Now, for day-to-day employee recognition, you want to set guidelines so that your leaders acknowledge equivalent and similar contributions. So this is about not the big staff appreciation day that we plan and that people really get a big kick out of, but this is that day-to-day employee recognition so that you know how often you plan to do it and how many people are included in that day. Is it for everybody? So you want to make sure. Sometimes you might do it one team at a time, and that might be a day-to-day recognition. There might be one team within your organization that shines on a particular month, and so it's their turn, and so you take turns. You don't have to earn it. It just kind of goes around. So that's a day-to-day employee recognition. That one is really usually not competitive. It's a way to say thank you to everyone. Another key point: it's important to recognize everyone that contributed to success equally. So making sure that you don't leave names off. That's one of the cautions that I give around that is when you do something where you recognize employees by name, inevitably it's so hard to make sure that no one gets left off. Somehow on that particular slide that scrolls across the screen, somebody's name is not on there and we forgot to say thank you. So in a meeting, when you start calling out names, there are people that worked on that project and their name isn't called, and then they really feel bad about that. So it's important to make sure that everyone is being recognized. Employee recognition approaches and content also needs to be fair and not built on expectations or entitlements. And what this means is you want to make it so that we'll take one example for this one on entitlements. I know some organizations will do something like, everybody on a Friday is, usually the supervisor might bring in some kind of a sweet or treat or something like that. And so what happens then, if that's the expectation all the time, when the supervisor doesn't bring it, it's sort of like a letdown. Well, what happened? We must not be doing something right. So you want to make sure that you don't build an expectation that it becomes an entitlement. But there are these occasional things that happen. You also want to be specific when you're giving an individual recognition, why the person is receiving it. So that's about being specific to the individual as well as to the rest of the employees. So it's great to shine a spotlight on others. And so you don't want to shy away from that, because remember, you're doing recognitions that are individual, team, as well as entire organization recognition. So when you're highlighting a particular person or team, be specific about what they contributed and how they made a difference. Offer employees recognition as close to the event that they contributed to as possible. So that's something that you just want to keep in mind. All right. There's a book, and I had a message here. It was a quote from a book entitled, "How Full is Your Bucket?" How full is your bucket? And so this book had a message, and it's pretty valuable. So I just want to mention it. It said to look for the good in people and praise it. The authors cite numerous studies that have been shown that people are far more motivated and productive when their self-esteem is high due to praise and positive feedback. On the other hand, when people go around emptying the emotional buckets of others, they invariably poison the chemistry in the workplace and destroy everyone's morale, including their own, in the process. So, what this is really talking about is the fact that all of us get to a point where our bucket is filled up. We've worked day after day, we've had frustrations and challenges, and so we're right at our peak. And then what happens is we then lose it and we dump it out on somebody else in the workforce. We dump it by a snarky comment or a very pointed email, um, an email in all caps that uh, is not very kind. We do it by, just by our actions, our expressions. And so if we don't find ways to continue to empty our buckets in healthy ways, we end up filling it up, and then we dump it inappropriately on other people. And then that feeds a very negative workplace because others witness it. So I know there are work environments where I've heard, I can't imagine this, but I've heard that supervisor may actually yell at another adult employee. I can't imagine that, but I've heard that that happens. That there's yelling, that there's throwing objects around the office, or any kind of behaviors that, of course, are unprofessional and inappropriate. But if your other staff and supervisors see that, that really does create a poison in that environment. We have to know that that's not okay. And it's our responsibility as supervisors to make sure that we're handling that bucket in a very healthy way, by taking care of ourselves, by doing things that nurture us. I've shared in almost every supervisor workshop I've done at a conference a quote that I got from my supervisor. I had a particular supervisor for many, many years, and she taught me one thing that I'll never forget. She said that you can only nurture from your overflow. You can only nurture from your overflow. And so what she talked about is how important it was to replenish yourself with those things that keep you positive, those stress reducing activities that you have in your life, that your life has to have balance. And then when you're giving out your advice, your supervision, your encouragement, your praise, you're doing it from the overflow because your positivity is still on full. You're not going to let it go down to an empty point. So that was from Margie Craig. So that's something that you might want to keep in mind. One of our other 6 strategies that we emphasized in our objectives was going to focus on strengths, and then also one on needs. Now on the slide, I've combined those 2 things because they tend to go hand in hand. First of all, I want to call your attention to the word needs. It doesn't say strengths and weaknesses, and so that's intentional. And so what I want to encourage you to think about is, instead of thinking about an employee with a weakness, think about that they have a need. So this is just a different way to look at it. A weakness can seem almost insurmountable sometimes. So we want people to know that no one is expected to be perfect. But if we think of it as a need is something that we can fulfill. A need is something that we grow from. Everyone has needs. A weakness has such a negative connotation, so I'm encouraging you to replace that word when you're talking about your employees and when you're talking about yourself. So first thing, let's focus more on strengths than needs. So we know that we have strengths and needs, but let's make our primary focus on strengths to begin with. So let's make sure that we're aware of what those strengths are. Every employee that we have comes to us with a different style of communication, a different level of motivation, a different attitude, and also their own desires. So everyone is unique. Our last session, in fact, we talked about diversity and how important diversity is to an organization. So for this one, we're just re-emphasizing that recognition that people bring with them different skill sets, different interactions, different styles, and that is their strength. So we don't want a team where everyone's the exact same, or that no one challenges our ideas or the company's direction. Without challenge, there's really no way to break into areas that we may not have even thought of before. So even though we know that folks are coming with these strengths, we also know that there are needs that everyone is going to bring to the table. Once you know what the strengths are, then of each employee, it also helps you to see if there's any gaps in what you need. If you know what the strengths are first, it helps you to then know which strength can assist with someone else's needs. So that's another reason why you want to focus on strengths first. If I know I have one employee with a strength in speaking in a meeting, and they're always prepared and they speak well and they have their notes, and I have another employee that has great information but is really uncomfortable speaking, I can match that strength with a need. It doesn't have to come from me as a supervisor, but I can match those individuals up together. That also helps to strengthen my team. Then the person with the need can assist the other individual with one of their areas of growth. So by identifying strengths, you're able to address needs. So they really do go hand in hand. Okay. One of our final topics that we wanted to talk about is how to be a problem solver. And so our quote that we have at the top of this slide is that learning never ends. Learning never ends. So the first problem solving tip is to encourage professional development. So when we talk about this one, if you have an employee that has great potential, they typically are not going to be satisfied with being mediocre. They are individuals that come to you. Usually they have lots of questions. They want to get some feedback from you. They want to grow and develop. They're the employee that comes and they'll say, I read this article, or I went to this conference, or, when I was at home last night, I thought about this. But you'll have individuals who really want to know. So our first step in being a problem solver as a supervisor is that we've got to encourage that professional development. So when you have someone like that, we want to encourage that, to say, bring me more questions, bring more ideas, more research, more information. That's really great that you took the time to find that out. Because you did that, we'd like to send you to this conference. We'd like to, we're going to purchase some materials and some journals. How about if you select the journal that we're going to purchase, or an online resource? We'd like you involved in selecting that. So that's all part of encouraging that professional development. If you have someone that's doing that and it's almost like if no one cares, then what motivation do they have to keep doing it? Typically, an individual like that will not stay with your organization if they don't feel like there's opportunities to grow. Second problem-solving tip, create a professional development plan. In your annual review or at another time, you want to take an opportunity to talk with each employee about their goals. And you want to find out if their goals are aligned with what their strengths are, or with what their experience is, with where the company's headed. One of the things you can do is, if they have a goal in mind, but they haven't yet developed in that area, then that's a great opportunity for you to set up on their professional development plan. You want to give them the opportunity to develop those skill sets. I know there's individuals and organizations that would like to be supervisors, and they haven't supervised before, and they're not quite sure how to make that happen. So one of their goals is to develop some leadership skills. So you want to be able to give them those opportunities. You want to do whatever we can to set their goals and expectations at a level that's going to align with career opportunities so that they can achieve those things. I learned very early that it's a compliment when someone that you supervise ends up growing into a higher position. So you always want to be part of encouraging people to grow by developing a plan. If you don't develop the plan, it is likely that it won't happen. Third tip, pair employees with mentors. So one thing that many organizations are doing that's great is developing mentor relationships with other people throughout the organization. So if there's opportunities for your employees that want leadership and they're not in a leadership capacity, perhaps allowing them to shadow other leaders in your company, perhaps having them shadow your CEO if they're interested in policy, if they're interested in developing and writing materials on your organization, they might be paired with someone in communications. So this is all about, first of all, you have to know what their goals are to be able to do some appropriate pairing with mentors. In fact, one of the first things that you want to recommend to your staff is you want to talk to them to find out if they have a mentor. And the mentor may not be the supervisor. The mentor may be someone else. It may be someone that doesn't even work for your organization. But everyone that's interested in professional growth really should have a mentor. Fourth problem-solving tip is to help your employees build their networks. There are so many professional organizations that provide networking opportunities. Think about whether or not you believe that your staff have the permission and encouragement from you or your organization to participate on those networks. So these are some questions. Do you make the time for them to attend networking meetings in the community? Do you encourage it? Are they posted? Or is your environment one where you think, well, that's not that important, and so people feel like they don't have permission to do that? You feel like it's not really working when you're networking. So you want to watch the messages that you might be giving, because keep in mind that the more your employees are networking with others, the more others are learning about your organization. And they're also learning about great employees that work for you. But stronger networks for employees means a stronger network for your organization. So it's a win-win if you have employees that have lots of connections in your community. Build on those things. Fifth tip for being a problem solver is to challenge employees with assignments. So this is one that's all about getting out of your comfort zone. So we know that there are areas that we perform well in and we're great at a particular thing, and you have your staff that say, you know what, I'm great at that. I'll take that every time. But keep in mind that an employee can't move forward if they're not growing. And, if they can't grow, they're never going to get out of leaving that comfort zone. So you want to, when you identify those strengths in your employee, you want to identify where the gaps are, and you want to challenge your employee with assignments to develop other skill sets. Now, that's not throwing them out there, and just letting them hang out there, but it's really putting them in positions where they have a chance to grow and develop with your support, your encouragement, being their biggest cheerleader, along the way. So when we challenge, we've got to challenge with support. So that's important to keep in mind. There's one final problem-solving tip that I wanted to share, and that's all about showing your employees that you trust them. Because if you want to help your employees develop, we've got to get out of their way and let them do the work. So if we've been really clear in our expectations, we've modeled the behavior that we expect, we've shown them that they have our trust, this lets the employee know that we believe that they can succeed. It gives them great ownership over whatever the assignment or the process is. And it also shows them that, that they're important in the organization and that we need them to be able to do it. So this is about, remember, we have to be clear on expectations, we've got to model the behavior, and we've got to communicate that we trust. Because if we continue to try and do all of it ourselves, our employee does not get an opportunity to develop and may feel as though we think that they can't do it, and they really can. So these 6 tips for problem solving will hopefully address some of the areas around effective supervision that you may have had some questions around. So hopefully those 6 will provide you with some good feedback. On our last slide, there's some resources that are there. In addition to, now remember that there was the picture of the book that was in the other part of the slides. But in addition, these are 3 online resources. These are quick things that you can look up. One is on the importance of communication skills for supervisors. There's a second one is how to demonstrate communication skills. And then the last one, the 6 tips to help employees grow and develop. The 6 tips I shared with you are taken from that particular article by David Grossman, and they're good, they're simple, and hopefully they're things that you can utilize. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten some good information about supervision. We stated that this session was all about strategies for active supervision. We addressed our 6 areas in our objectives that we talked about. And so hopefully you've gotten some good information to get you started. It built on our earlier presentation from last time. And now I have 3 questions that have come in that I will respond to. So the first question I've received is, how important are regular staff meetings and how often should they be held? So remember the survey that was done by Ken Blanchard. So regular staff meetings are very important to employees, and at least monthly. That is a stretch, so at least monthly. But remember that many people wanted a weekly staff meeting. So, anywhere between 1 week to a month at a time. And, remember you can have them in person as well as through a conference call or a Skype or, some other kind of setting, but making sure that you have those regular staff meetings. Question 2, do you have any pointers on how to supervise telecommuters? Okay, so this question is kind of interesting. I actually do supervise staff that are in different offices, and I work with other supervisors that do the same. So telecommuting, if you're working, so I'm going to expand it to just say if you're supervising someone who doesn't work in the office that you work in, they may work at home or they may work in a different location. But when a supervisor and a staff member is not in the same location, you really do have to put in some extra effort to keep the lines of communication flowing and to make sure the person feels supported and not like they're out there on their own. So I would say frequent communication, at least weekly, is going to be very important. That may not be a formal meeting, but there should not be a week where that employee does not have communication with you. Sometimes that might even be more frequently through frequent phone calls. The other thing is that it's important to occasionally prioritize getting together in person. So, one or both of you may need to travel sometimes, but it really is important to have an occasional meeting that is face to face. Also, being real clear on expectations and having a game plan works well in those situations to know, okay, it's the beginning of the week. Let's look at all the things we have in front of us and to have some way of checking back and forth. Using something through your email like a shared calendar can make a big difference. I have a shared calendar with my team that helps a lot. We're able to see where we are, what kinds of things we're working on. So having access to each other's calendar can be very important. So those are some of the tools I'd encourage you to use for supervision in that way. The third question was, how do I get my managers to stop micromanaging their staff? Okay, so micromanagement is something that, based on my personality, it is a pet peeve personally. So I would say not many people like to be micromanaged. So I would say first remind the manager of how it feels when they are micromanaged. So it's the same for their employees. So micromanaging is not something that many people enjoy. So it's important to just kind of have that parallel process where you're saying, as you micromanage others, you have to put yourself in the position that what if I were micromanaging you? So you want to encourage the managers to make sure that they are not micromanaging the supervisor, and the supervisor is not micromanaging their staff, because that really doesn't result in growth. And we talked a lot about employees growing and developing, where if you're micromanaged, it's almost impossible to grow. So those are our 3 questions, 3 responses. I hope they were helpful. So it's been my pleasure to have this follow-up session on supervision. I wish you the best, and I look forward to another great webinar in the future. And I'm thankful that United Partners for Human Services invited me to come back, and I applaud all the efforts of their organization. Have a great day.